Good evening, and thank you for joining us. As a reminder, we're recording this meeting and we will post the meeting video and materials to the project website. This is our January 12th, 2023 Filtration Project Neighbor Information Meeting. My name is Benita Oswald, and I coordinate the communications for the Bull Run Filtration Project. And on our agenda today, we have we'll start off with our program deputy director, Michelle Cheek, and she will provide us with an update on the Bull Run Filtration Project milestones. Then we'll have our pipeline design manager, Dan Hogan, who will talk about some of the lane and road closures for the pipeline installation. And we also have Lyda Hakes, our design facility design manager, who will be talking about our Carpenter Lane. Last time at our meeting, we had a request for someone to talk about the proposed changes to Carpenter Lane. So we're going to do that tonight. And before we close out the meeting, we will discuss the communications, what communications will look like for construction, and any additional questions or comments that you might have. So now I will turn it over to Michelle.
Thanks, Bonita. Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. I think we could still say that for a couple more days anyways. I will kick off tonight's meeting with some quick updates on the filtration project progress, and then turn it over to Dan and Lyda, and then back to Bonita. But here we are in a new year, and now a little less than 5 years away from our September 2027 deadline to deliver filtered Bull Run water. Next slide. And 2022 was an important year for the project and meeting some important milestones. In September of 2022, we submitted our land use application to Multnomah County and are working on the next steps with the county. I'll share further updates on the next slide. In October of 2022, we submitted the filtration facility construction plans to the Oregon Health Authority, meeting our regulatory deadline to submit construction plans. And we're now working on the final design details, or the icing on the cake, and preparing the 100% design deliverable for the filtration facility and the 90% design deliverable for the pipelines portion of the project. And later this month, we will be submitting our land use application to Clackamas County for the portions of the project located in Clackamas County. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, we submitted our land use application to Multnomah County in September of 2022. The county deemed our initial application incomplete, which just means that they need some additional information on a few topics. Our project team is working on preparing this additional information for this request, and we're hoping to achieve completeness in February. Once the county deems the application complete, there will be a 150-day application review period, which also includes a public hearing and a county hearings officer decision. And just as a reminder, the land use process includes avenues for public comment throughout, and more information on the land use process can be found at the county's website, and their web address is listed in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. And now that we're approaching the end of the design phase, we're doing more planning for facility construction. We're working with the contractor to develop an overall schedule and sequencing of work with a planned construction start date of September of this year for the facility, and then spring of 2024 for the pipelines. Part of the construction planning includes identifying construction safety measures and other best practices to limit disruption to our site neighbors and surrounding community. And Bonita will also be leading ongoing communication and outreach to our site neighbors and local businesses. And Bonita will talk about this a little bit later in the presentation, but we'll also be getting the contractor for the facility and the pipelines out to meet with our neighbors and surrounding community as we lead up to and during construction. And with that, I will turn it over to Dan to talk about some of the construction traffic considerations.
Thanks, Michelle. So this project has both pipelines and a filtration facility that's being constructed. The facility is near our existing pipelines, but it's not quite exactly in the right location. So on the slide here, you can see the green line. That is will be our unfiltered water going into the plant. And then the blue lines going out up to the north and the west are the filtered water. This construction of the pipelines, as Michelle stated, will start in spring of 24, and it does go through 2027. We're going to be working on a lot of roads, but the work will not be all simultaneously. It'll be more of a linear construction. Next slide, please. So this is kind of all our locations that we're working that you can see here. When we are going to be laying out our construction plan, we're going to try to maintain the flow of traffic as best as we can. We've been meeting with schools in the area and have incorporated input from them. We've been talking with the farmers out there, all the nurseries, and we're going to put a lot of constraints on the project that won't allow the contractor to work in multiple locations at the same time. And all this is going to occur while we still deliver Bull Run water to the city of Portland and all its wholesale customers. Next slide. So that slide was a little busy, so we broke it down. At location 1 here, this is on Lusted Road, kind of near where Dodge Park meets. This is where we're meeting our existing 3 pipelines and are going to enter some private property and then go up the hill to our facility. This is going to require intermittent road closures at this location that could be on the order of a few months at a time, and it will occur throughout the whole project. The constraints we kind of put on the contractor here is to make sure emergency vehicles and such can still get through, and to have traffic open at nighttime. Next slide. Locations 2, 3, and 4 are on Dodge Park Boulevard. This is our finished water pipe now as it comes out of the facility. We'll have single lane traffic in Dodge Park. The reason 2 and 3 are separated is the constraints vary a bit on these based on the nursery operations that'll be going on. And location 4 is where we leave Dodge Park into a farm field. And at that location, we do need to cross Dodge Park, and there will be a semi-short closure of 1 to 2 months there. And that will be also timed around farm operations. Next slide. This project does require us to connect back to what we call the Lusted Road distribution main that's down below on Lusted Road, but we need to connect back up to it. So we're going to do that along Cottrell Road. Most of the work here is a trenchless installation, though there is some open cut. And what that means is we won't necessarily be digging up the road the whole way, but there still is going to be a lane taken in that, and we'll have single lane traffic in that while that work's going on. Next slide. Locations 7, 8, and 9 come out of what we call our finished water intertie. That's where the two new pipes that come out of the facility are going to join up with the 3 existing conduits along Lusted Road, which is very narrow, that will require a road closure there. And this is going to occur in 2 different instances, one kind of in the middle of the project and the other at the very end. Lusted does have all 3 conduits in it currently right now, so that's why we're tying in there. Excuse me, it has one of the conduits in there that we're tying into. And then on location 8 going up Altman Road, we're going up to meet the other 2 conduits at Pipeline and Oxbow. The reason 8 and 9 are separated here is also so traffic from Pipeline can either get to the north or the south depending on what part we're constructing. So 8 and 9 will not be at the same time. And on the next slide, at Pipeline Road, because it is a bit narrow, we do have to close that road down to tie into an existing conduit. And right now we're aiming at the summer for that one. And that has to do with making sure school buses can get through in the school year. And here it is again, just in summary. The closures will be, let's see, so you can see here that there's a lot of work in a lot of different locations. The work will be staged over several years. Staging of the work will allow for flow of traffic around the work zones. The good thing about the country roads out here is that they are kind of laid out in a grid. So if we're working in one location, the detours are relatively short. Next slide. And we're going to prioritize safety and keeping traffic moving as we're doing this. This is just a conceptual figure of work that would be going on Dodge Park Boulevard. It does have 100-foot right of way. So on Dodge Park, we will always have one lane open to traffic. So it will require flagging. And we're taking into account safety measures, keeping the traffic moving. Emergency access will be maintained throughout on all the locations. And we're going to use continuous communication with the public and whatnot to make sure that things are safe. Next slide. This is just an example of a work zone here with traffic control measures. So as 2 lanes come up to the work zone, it would just go down to 1 lane as it goes through the work zone, and then out the other side, and then traffic will be going the other direction. Next slide. So one of our biggest focuses, and our contractors as well, is just to make sure that we have a safe and well-managed work zone. There'll be flagging at all times, that we're having closures or single lane traffic. There'll be temporary offsite signage for traffic routes, notifications sent out. We'll be using street sweeping and on-site dust control, posting safety signs. The equipment will be operated safely, and the contractor will exercise daily cleanups to make sure the site's safe at nighttime. And next slide.
All right, thanks, Dan. Does anybody have any questions for Dan about any of the pipeline information he just shared? Your hands, you can raise your hand, you can pop on your video.
I know it's a lot to take in.
Thanks. All right, then we will move on to Lyda, and then she will talk about our Carpenter Lane.
Perfect. Thanks, Bonita. Thank you, Dan. So I'm here to talk with y'all to update on the Carpenter Lane improvements. So Aubrey, if you could advance the next slide, please. Our proposed Carpenter Lane improvements are based on county requirements for local rural roadways. We will be looking to widen Carpenter Lane between Cottrell and the end of the street. We're looking to widen that to 24 feet. All of that is within the county public right of way. We're expecting to maintain the current center line. We'll resurface it with a fresh asphalt surface. And we're also looking to have 6-foot gravel shoulders. But per county code requirements, we are not proposing any curbs in these locations. Next slide. The roadway improvements, again, are expected to be within the public right-of-way. And so here we've taken a Google Earth satellite image and we've overlaid our design onto it. And so to orient you, you have Dodge Park at the top, Cottrell Road on the left side of the screen, and then Carpenter Lane. We have it broken into 3 different sections: the west, the central, and the east. And in the next slide, I'll walk through section by section. So we wanted to give a representation that would help folks kind of see what this design on paper may look like in real life. So we dropped on the satellite imagery. In some areas, it's not quite perfect because of the rendering, but we wanted to share this with you. So here you can see we have a little bit of asphalt surfacing we'll do in the intersection of Cottrell, but as you travel east, it's a crown road design, so highest in the center and slopes downward for the rainwater flow. And then we have all the work is being done within this right of way. And again, 24 feet across with 6-foot gravel shoulders. On the next slide, we have the central section. Again, it looks very similar to the previous 24 across with the 6-foot shoulders. And then the last section is the eastern or east section. At this point, this view shows the entry to our facility. We have an angular entrance right there, and then Carpenter Lane ends right at that last property. On the next slide, this is another way to look at it, is to look at it from a more person height looking down. Again, we use some Google imagery here. So currently Carpenter Lane varies from about 18 to 20 feet across with 1 lane in each direction. Our proposed improvements are still 1 lane in each direction, but we would increase it to 24 feet across, so 12-foot lanes. We would also be adding the gravel shoulder. And for this intersection, we want to ensure that the right-hand turn from Carpenter going north onto Cottrell can be done safely. So we're looking to widen the turning radius to allow trucks to turn out off of Carpenter Lane. And so this ends up with an existing edge of pavement moving, but still well within the public right of way. And then next slide. In our last meeting, we did share with y'all some views of what the facility will look like from public areas. So here, if you were on Carpenter Lane near the northwest corner of the site, you'd see our landscaping there, and you would see a sliver of the communications tower kind of towards the center of the screen. And then towards the right of that image, you can see a little bit of the buildings, but they're kept pretty low profile. The bottom image shows if you're on Carpenter Lane and you're approaching the entrance, what the facility will look like. You can see that the Pleasant Home water tanks are a prominent feature. They're the bright green structure there. And then you can see we have a call box, so we can limit entry into our facility, and we have a mechanical gate. And the building structures, we maintain the angular roofs, and with the landscaping, it'll all blend in pretty nicely. Next slide. If you are traveling on Bluff Road, traveling west, then you can see there's a little slope naturally to the ground across the Surface Nursery property. And then again, you see the Pleasant Home water tanks are the prominent feature. Our communications tower is shown in this view. And then to the left of the Pleasant Home tanks, you can see the roof lines of the facility. But again, they're pretty close to the ground level when you're looking out from Bluff Road. Next slide. So looking forward, the 3 main elements are design. We're coordinating with Multnomah County on road, intersection, and driveway standards. We are designing the roadway improvements to meet the county requirements, and all this work is within existing right-of-way. And we're continuing the design of our proposed emergency access, which is from the facility down to Bluff Road. In terms of construction, Dan talked about some of the elements that are really critical in terms of sequencing and working with the community. So we're going to continue to work with the contractor on traffic controls, including provisions for local and emergency access during construction. And then Benita will continue her efforts to communicate with property owners moving forward. And then Benita, I think I can hand it over to you now.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Lida about the things that she's talked about? Carpenter Lane, and the views, the process coming up. You can raise your hand, you can type in the chat, you can turn on your camera and wave. All right. Well, then we'll move on to the next slide here. So, as we get a better understanding of the conditions that the county might have for the, and any sort of more refined plans, we will start to meet with individual property owners along the project routes to discuss potential impacts. Some of the construction, as construction ramps up, you might expect to see more of our emails and from e-news, and you might also see more of our website page being updated for construction. Sorry, I'm just going to take a okay, I will come back to that with the questions about Bluff Road. I see you there, Pat. We also will continue to send postcards and mail about the project, but we will also be having more direct contact with you when there's activity on or in front of your property, depending on the level of impact. That might be meetings or phone calls or door hangers. We also will have reader boards and that we've had previously for our anytime that we've had a lane closure or a road closure. And we'll continue that, and also the signage, as Dan mentioned. There will typically be Water Bureau staff somewhere in the construction area nearby, and we'll continue to take your comments and questions by email, phone, or online through our comment form. I know a few of you have been contacting me directly, and that's totally fine. However, as construction gets ramped up, we will have a few more people that will be monitoring that Bull Run project's email. So they will be able to help assist in responding. Some of the new things that we're looking at is a monthly coffee with the contractor. And that will allow you to be able to come and hear from the contractor firsthand what's coming up, and ask questions if you'd like. We are also considering a construction hotline, and that would be a 24-hour hotline that talks about what the current construction scenarios are, and also give you an opportunity to leave a message of concerns or anything like that. We are also looking at the ability to subscribe for text notifications because we know some folks prefer text over email. So it would be good for us to know if these tools are useful, or if you have other thoughts that you would find helpful. I see there's a few things in the chat though, so feel free to comment on our construction outreach tools too, but I'm going to I'll turn it over back to Lyda for the first question that we have, which is, will you improve the road from the facility to Bluff Road? It is now a path.
Great question. So one of the key elements of this being an emergency access road is that it has to be passable by emergency vehicles responding. So the fire code is very specific in terms of how that road needs to look. One of the key things is it has to have an all-weather surface. So we will be looking at putting gravel on that. The second thing is it has to be able to support a 75,000 pound service vehicle, so a standard fire truck. And then we'll also have to put some infrastructure in place to support fire hydrants. So the road width is very prescriptive in the code requirements, and we will be meeting all of those elements. So yes, improvements are definitely planned for that emergency access road.
And Lyda, there's also another question. When do you propose to repair Carpenter?
Sure. So that will be the construction manager, general contractor for the facility will be responsible for that work. And the first thing is really getting through county approval. So we are proposing these improvements to Carpenter Lane, but through the land use process and the county's transportation review, they will approve or require changes. At that point, once that design is settled, and we are able to start construction, getting Carpenter Lane built out is one of the key elements so that the contractor can safely come to and from site and efficiently.
Okay, Patricia has another question. Will any construction trucks be using the road from the facility to Bluff Road, or will it just be for emergency vehicles?
So that's a great question because there is a distinction in our construction period versus our operational period. So during our operational period, it is just for emergency vehicles. And for the construction period, though, we are anticipating the ability to have two-way traffic. One is that trucks may need to leave the site. The second is that we may need a vehicle to come through if there was an emergency. So we need to be able to maintain two-way flow on that emergency access road or during construction. The contractor will look at what makes the best sense for routing vehicles to and from the site. And we've been in communications with the Oregon Trail Academy to better understand their schedule in terms of pickup, drop off, how flow enters their property and leaves during those key times. So we are looking at that, but yes, construction trucks will be able to use that access road during construction.
All right, thank you, Lyda. We have another question regarding safety and roads. So Dan, you might want to come up for this one too, and maybe even Michelle. If the project moves forward, what efforts will be made to improve the safety and road conditions of alternate routes through the community during the road construction or road closures? Altman is currently one of the safest routes for passenger vehicles to travel I-84 or to I-84. If we are forced to take a less safe route for a 9-month closure, what are you going to do to address the safety on those alternate routes which lead to the through residential areas?
Yeah, that is a good question. So the road closures won't be for the entire length of Altman. It's just through the work zones that we're in. And yes, people will have to go around, and we will have to put our traffic control plan into the county for review. And we will basically have to live or build the zone up to the standards that the county requires. It will be a little bit slower traffic through some of these areas, but there are other routes that are still safe, and we'll use signs on those roads as well that if that is the detour route.
Okay, thanks. Dan, did you have anything to add, Michelle?
No, just other than, like Dan said, just want to reiterate, we'll be working with the county and the contractor to develop those safe construction routes and have, the appropriate flagging and safety in place during those periods.
All right, for Dan, we have another question. What road will be the main construction road, Carpenter, or the Bluff access road? So I'm going to stop at that. There's more question, but I wanted to.
Yeah.
Or maybe this is for Lyda.
I think that's really for me.
Yeah.
For the facility, we're the ones who are located off Carpenter Lane. So I think that in general, Carpenter Lane will be one of the primary routes. However, again, during construction, we will work with the contractor. There's periods where it may be more efficient to do two-way routing on the southern access route from Bluff into the facility, or two-way routing on Carpenter Lane. It really depends on the kind of work being performed, what kind of traffic is happening, and really trying to coordinate with area impacts from the pipelines project. So if it's going to hold up local traffic, it's going to hold up our construction traffic. And so we want to be really cognizant of the two projects and make sure we're not having a cascading effect on the community.
And you mentioned, Lyda, that the Bluff access road will be
Mhm.
used for construction during
Mhm.
construction time.
Correct.
But once it's in operation, that will be an emergency access. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, yeah. So one of the key things about needing the secondary emergency access is it's required by fire code. There are linear distance separation requirements from your main entry to a secondary entry so that service vehicles or emergency service providers can access your site if the primary site is unavailable for some reason. And so that is the purpose for having that secondary emergency access road. And we do not intend on ever needing to use it. It is really for emergencies only. Our main traffic, all our traffic for the facility will be going on Carpenter Lane. It's where we have our main gate. We have a mechanical gate there to allow traffic in and out through card readers or through the call box. We are not having that same level of infrastructure on that emergency access. It's really going to be you have a key and you open it when it's the emergency. So it is not intended for daily use or intermittent use. It's really just for emergencies.
And Lyda, I do want to add that access from Bluff during construction, the pipeline contractor will be building a shaft at the that's off of it, so they will too use it for some construction traffic as well. They'll be removing materials from the site and bringing some in. It won't be at the levels as some of the other locations as far as frequency, but the two contractors will have to coordinate with each other as well, as Lyda alluded to.
Okay, great, thanks. So let's see, Paul had also asked, what is the process you're using with Clackamas County relative to the Bluff access road? I know that we have a Clackamas County land use application that will be going in soon. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Lyda?
Sure. So Clackamas County, the infrastructure we're planning is really just this emergency access road. So we are going through the land use process. We are submitting that shortly. And again, these are proposed improvements, but we will work with the county. And as part of that, the service providers will look through and make sure it meets their requirements as well.
All right, great. Thanks to you both for that. Carol asks, are you going to rebuild the base of Carpenter Lane? That'd be for you, Lyda.
Yes, so we've done some geotechnical work to understand the shallow subsurface in the area of Carpenter Lane, and our designers will be proposing a road surface with base that would handle the traffic on that surface.
Right.
Yeah, I'd point out too that the county wouldn't accept a road that's beat up at the end of the project. They'd make us rebuild it.
So also Carol is wondering about the pipelines, Dan, and she's wondering about the property that we purchased directly across from the facility. Are we going to be using that property for pipelines?
I'm not sure which one was Dan's property. What's his last name?
Well, he's the one that it's the property B, so it's the middle
Okay, B.
property. Yeah.
Yes, we are going under it. Essentially, it's a trenchless installation. So from the facility's outlet where the finished water comes out, we're gonna do a tunnel, essentially a trenchless installation of the pipelines under the property out to Dodge Park Boulevard. So we won't have any interruptions of Carpenter Lane from the residents or from the facilities trying to get in and out of their construction site. But we are going under that property.
From Dodge Park to
yeah, from Dodge Park back to the facility.
All right. Thank you. Jennifer is asking who is going to serve you for emergencies. Did you want to take that, Lyda?
Yeah, so We have reached out to local service providers. We've been working with Gresham Fire, Rural District 10. We've been working with Multnomah County Sheriff and Clackamas County Sheriff. So we are in communications with all of them. We've provided updates to those groups about our project and our progress to date. And what we refer to as will serve letters have been submitted as part of our land use application for Multnomah County, and will be in the Clackamas County land use submittal.
Right. Carol is asking, where are we on the Multnomah County land use process? Do you want to take that, Michelle?
Yeah, sure thing. So as I mentioned earlier, we submitted our application to our land use application to Multnomah County in September of 2022. And there's a completeness review process that the county does. And the county has deemed our application incomplete because they're looking for some additional pieces of information, which we are working with our team to provide back to them. And once we get that information back to them, they will do another completeness review, and we're hoping to have our application deemed complete in February. And then once it's deemed complete, that 150-day application review period begins, during which there is a public hearing, and also the county hearings officer issues their decision. And again, during that process, there will be avenues for public comment throughout.
All right, thanks, Michelle. We have some concerns in the chat now from Natalie and Pat related to the recent attacks on electrical facilities. And though Natalie is quoting LIDA saying that we don't intend to ever use the emergency access, there's a similar statement we heard a few weeks ago that there is not a terrorism concern because threats have never been made to the Portland water facility before. I think our power stations may have claimed the same thing a few months ago. The lack of planning for the community safety is deeply concerning. We hear you, Natalie, and but we are doing a lot to plan for the safety of the community and ensuring that we are able to serve water. With over 170 electrical plant attacks to date, Pat says, the fact that we have not had one communications that addresses safety for both terrorism and chemical accidents is very disconcerting. We hear you there too, Pat, and we have talked quite a bit about safety for this project, and we will, if there's something in particular that you would like to know, we'd be interested in those comments or those questions as well. As you know, because of terrorist threats, we don't necessarily say a lot of information about how we're preparing, because we don't want to be in a position to be vulnerable to those attacks. So I hope that you can understand that, but as we move on, we will continue to continue our safety plans. Natalie says, has the Department of Homeland Security ever been contacted and given a chance to weigh in on the building critical infrastructure in residential area? Does anybody have anything to comment on that?
I mean, I would just, no, I mean, the short answer is no. But in terms of, critical infrastructure outside the water facility, it really is up to those individual organizations or utilities to manage their services within the area.
Thanks, Michelle. And Pat made the comment that the local community is left blind, and I will say that we do what we can to protect the infrastructure that we need to serve our facility. Jennifer says Dave Peter was asked to give District 10 a PWB hazmat training records. Has that been given to District 10? Yes, we have given that to them. If you'd like a copy, happy to send it to you, but they also have a copy they can share. Anybody else?
Hi, this is Mike Cowan. I have a question.
Sure.
So the power lines on the power pole on the northeast side along Cottrell where Carpenter Lane at, that obviously looks like we have to be moved. Is that correct? So are you gonna move it across the street?
So I can take that, Benita. So
Mhm.
we're working with PGE to share with them where our proposed improvements are to the roadway so that they can safely place power poles on
Okay.
Cottrell and
Had
Carpenter.
a survey crew out there about 6 weeks ago, and they were walking along surveying the other side of Cottrell and talking about the power lines, possibly the trees over there would be in the way. So that's what I was wondering.
Mhm. Yes, we did have survey crews out there. We wanted to pick up key points along the Cottrell Carpenter alignment. And in terms of impacts to individual property owners, all of our proposed improvements are in the right of way. But Benita and her team will work one-on-one with those individuals.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, you're welcome.
All right, anybody else? Great questions today. Pat is asking, was there ever an archaeological study done on the property? Is this required for a land use permit? Michelle, are you familiar with that topic?
Yeah, I can answer that question. Yes, we did do an archaeological study, although it's not required for the land use permitting process. It was required for our WIFIA loan application and the documentation that was required to apply for that loan.
Anybody else? A lot of information today, so. Raise your hand, you can come online, talk, come off mute like Mike was. Another one from Jennifer in the chat. What is the cost estimate for the project? Michelle?
Yep, our current cost estimate is still what we've been communicating in the past meetings, and the total program cost for both projects is at the 1.35 billion.
And we do have a web page with that information on it, so that has a little bit more detail in it, and I'll just put the link to that in the chat. And Paul is asking, is that with or without escalation?
Yes, it does. It does include an allowance for escalation.
Carol asks, has the rise in interest rate affected the loan?
Yeah, great question. And fortunately, no, when we locked in our interest rates with WIFIA, that was when the interest rates were quite low. So we have, I don't remember what the exact interest rate is, but I think it's just below 2. But yeah, we were able to lock in a really good interest rate with our WIFIA loan.
And Patricia asks, does this amount keep you within the budget parameters? Did you want to expand on that at all, Patricia? I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Yeah, I'll give you some time to type that in the chat in case you can't come off mute, but Natalie has a questions or a statement. During the recent ice storm, we had a tanker fuel truck slide off the road into our front yard. He was attempting to deliver fuel to the PWB location unlisted. The truck was facing the wrong way on Dodge Park for over 5 hours, causing a huge traffic hazard. How will you prevent this from continuing to happen? Anyone take that? Michelle.
Yeah, I can attempt to answer that. I mean, that's obviously a very unfortunate event that did happen. And it sounds like nobody was hurt or there wasn't any fuel spilled, which is good. But obviously, you know, we can't control the weather, and you know, have to just trust that truck drivers are doing their best to drive safely, to deliver fuel to our facility or any site out in the area.
Right. So Patricia followed up with her question about, does the amount keep you within the budget parameters? And she says, originally you were given 850 million.
I'm still not sure I understand the question, and the originally you were given 850 million from WIFIA or?
From Portland City Council.
Yes, we have adjusted the budget over the years, as you guys, as y'all have watched through city council meetings. But our most recent budget that we have been holding to is that 1.35 billion, which again is the WIFIA loan amount that we were given.
Yeah, and the budget for the original cost was the 820 million for filtration. The other part was for improved corrosion control, and that was just for the cost of doing the facility, not the contingency financing costs, interest. Right. And so that's where the 1.4 billion comes from. Let's see. Carol asks, are you planning to use local subcontractors? Anybody want to take that? I know you all are aware.
Yeah, I can take that one, Bonita. Yes, we are planning to use local subcontractors. And the contractors for both projects will be putting different portions of the project out to bid in the local contracting community.
Jennifer asks, I noticed in the OPB article on January 4th, the stated cost was 1 billion. Where is the disconnect between the writer and PWB? Is that not misleading to ratepayers? Unfortunately, we cannot control what gets printed. We send corrections and they choose whether they are going to update it or not. Patricia asked, do you only receive 50% of the project costs? I'm not sure. Do we only receive 50% of the project costs in terms of
the WIFIA loan?
Elaborate. The loan.
Yeah, the 49% of the project cost are eligible for reimbursement from WIFIA, and the remainder of the cost would be funded through Water Bureau rates.
Natalie asked, have you notified the mayor and city councils of Fairview, Gresham, Wood Village, and Troutdale of the construction traffic and continuous transportation of hazardous chemicals through their communities on their major roadways.
To my knowledge, we have not, Bonita. Unless there's been some sort of communication that I am not aware of, but yeah, we have not been in direct contact with mayors of those communities.
Many of these communities do receive some of our water. Is that correct, Michelle?
Gresham does, yes. Wood Village and Troutdale, no. Fairview, unless they get their water through Gresham, and I honestly don't know the details of that. But yeah, Gresham does currently get water from the Water Bureau. And, you know, we do have deliveries going through these areas already to deliver chemicals or fuel to our Lusted Hill facility and also our Headworks facility.
All right, thank you. And Pat asks a question, why do you continue to push the project as required by the Federal Safe Drinking Act when in fact the filtration plant is a choice at PWB, Portland City as a solution method, even though other less expensive methods have been approved as well? Do you want to take that, Michelle?
Yeah, so there are different ways of meeting that regulatory requirement to treat for cryptosporidium and meet the requirements of federal regulations. And we took those options to city councils many years ago before this, or as we were starting this project. And city council chose filtration over some of the other alternatives because for the additional benefits that it provides beyond, say, UV, which is also an approved method for cryptosporidium inactivation. And, you know, one of the biggest benefits of filtration is it also removes turbidity from our water source, from our Bull Run water source. So when we have, you know, big rain events that increase our turbidity, or, you know, the future unknowns of a forest fire, filtration will help with those events that could happen and impact our water quality. So it's a more resilient approach for the future and ensure we can continue to meet regulations going forward.
And Michelle, we do have an agreement with the Oregon Health Authority, right, to actually build a filtration facility, not to build anything different.
Correct.
Any other questions? Gabby says, today a chemical accident happened near Chicago. Chemicals used for water treatment were released. Okay. Thanks for that information. We are doing our best to try to keep that from happening. And I know with our chemicals, we are planning to have a double catch system. Is that right, Lida? Do you know more about that?
Double containment, correct?
Double containment.
Yes, you were so close. You were so close. Yes, so we'll have a double containment. So if the first layer fails, the second layer contains it. It can handle about, I think 120% of the volume in that tank. So more than enough. And we have, through this multi-year design process, we've looked at which options will, how can we continue to treat the water in a way with less hazardous chemicals? And so one of the big changes that we did is at our Headworks facility, we use gaseous chlorine, which has a lot of hazard issues. And at our facility, we're actually going to use, we're going to generate our own hypochlorite by bringing in salt making a brine solution, adding electricity, and creating chlorine to use at the facility. So where we were able to, we selected chemicals that are less hazardous.
Right. Natalie says these decisions were made by Portland City Council, who bears no adverse effects to their community other than the astronomical water rate increase heading their way. Wouldn't it be fair and transparent to notify local governments on transportation plans? We can all look at maps and figure out East County roads will be detrimentally impacted. Well, we actually have trucks going through this area and many of these roads already, taking different chemicals to the Lefted Hill facility and also through to our watershed. I'm sure there's a lot of other companies and agencies that are doing the same, but we don't necessarily have to notify anyone about that. I mean, it's just the way that our community works. But we do our best to make sure that our transportation is safe and what we can do. And does anybody else want to add anything to those concerns? All right, Carol asks, oh, go ahead, Michelle.
I was just gonna say, I think you covered it well. Thank you, Bonita.
Carol asks, how many cryptosporidium tests have tested positive in the last year and a half? Does anybody know that question? I know we had a crypto hit today. I mean, that was
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that on the top of my head, and I was just looking on our website. I'm not going to attempt to do public math, but I can put a link to our cryptosporidium results that are posted on our website in the chat.
All right, thanks, Michelle. We're running up to about 2 minutes left in our time here today. If anybody has any other questions or comments. Jennifer says, this belongs in the city where it serves. City council ruined Portland. It's easy to spend other people's money when you have no skin in the game. I appreciate the comment and take note of that. Anybody else? All right, with 1 minute left, maybe we will go to the next slide here. So upcoming meeting is on April 13th. And that's our next scheduled meeting. And we will determine what we'll talk about as soon as we get a little bit closer to that meeting, depending on all the interesting things that will happen between now and then. But I appreciate everybody coming out and hearing your questions and your comments. And we know that's late and we appreciate you taking this time and energy to be here. So, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.